Hello, everyone. Welcome back to TeaCup Entrepreneurs. I'm your host here, Stephanie Pellish, and I'm so excited to bring you another episode. This is our third episode, and today I'm excited to introduce you to Dr. Anna Bolshin. And Anna is a mom of two boys and a sweet golden doodle. She always knew that she wanted to work with kids, and she and I have that in common. And she became a physical therapist, and that gave her a combination of all of the things that she loved: science, kids, and fun with play. So she has a lot of experience, 12 years of experience in a variety of settings. And now she owns her own practice here locally in Pennsylvania and sees kids mostly in their homes. And she's dedicated to sharing her clinical knowledge, expanding her clinical skills. And we're going to dive in and talk to Anna today all about what's going on in her world. So, welcome, Anna.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm not used to such biographies. I
I like to be fancy
appreciate
around
that.
here.
Thank you.
Welcome. Yeah, so let's just start by give a little bit of the bio, but who are you? What do you do? And
Sure.
tell us all of the things.
Sure. Absolutely. As you said, I'm a mom of two. Um, we actually moved to Pennsylvania. It's going to be, let's see, 3 years in August. And although I've been a PT now actually for, let's see, 2008, so 16 years. Um, when I was in New York, which is where I'm from, I always said I'm a really great PT, but I'm not a business owner. Being a business owner is not for me. I'm just not going to do it, right?
Hmm.
It's so much work. I realize how much more work it is now being a business owner, but I felt like it wasn't in the cards for me. But because I've been working for such a long time, I have been exposed to so many different settings. I've worked in hospitals and schools and outpatient and home care and early intervention, adults even, um, because I was looking for the right fit. And every setting that I have worked in, I felt limitations, right? Whether
Hmm.
it'll be the kind of bureaucratic structure, whether it be insurance, whether it be finances and the bottom line and profit. I felt like I wasn't able to do things the way I wanted to and I knew to be right, and I was frustrated because PT is a doctorate, so I went to school for with college 7 years, and I felt like, wow, I went to school for 7 years to do this. Like that was always kind of at the back of my mind.
Meaning
So
you felt restricted in what you could actually do.
yeah, and how
Yeah.
I can do it, and kind of limitations being placed on me on what and how many visits, and whether it be too little visits or too many visits, right? It wasn't that I was able to use my clinical knowledge and treat the way I knew was best for that child. Um, and that was very frustrating to me. So when I moved to Pennsylvania, it was like, well, I'm kind of building my life all over again, right? So I don't have that. My last job in New York, I actually worked for the Board of Education, which in many ways I loved, but in many ways I didn't. And, being a mom of two, working for the Board of Education, having those vacations off, right? Being able to be with those kids, it was very hard to leave that to start your own business, right? That you knew was going to take a lot of your time and effort. But now it was like, well, you don't have that job anymore. So are you finally at the tender age of 40 going to do things the way you want to do them and truly feel kind of fulfilled and doing what you were meant to do? So that's when I pulled the plug. And I recently changed the expression not to fake it until you make it, but face it until you embrace it.
Love that. I love that.
um,
Yes.
and
So
yeah,
can we dive in there a little bit? Like what
sure.
you said, like you didn't want to own the business and you made that decision. Like what really gave you that confidence or that blind, maybe naivete to
Yeah.
just jump
Yeah.
in and do it?
because when you make such a big change in your life, right? So I left my job, my husband left his job, my kids are like everything is new, right? It's a new, you
Mhm.
pick up and you leave, right? I know New York to Pennsylvania may not seem like a lot, but we had an established life there, right?
Yeah.
So you're now kind of reestablishing yourself, right? Um, and I interviewed with places here as well, but again, it always went back to I want to do things how I want to do them. I want to treat how I want to treat
Mhm.
because I know that that's going to be effective. So as much as I didn't want to be a business owner, that was the only way for me to be able to do that,
That
right?
passion overrode.
Exactly. So it's like the cost benefit analysis, right? Am I
Yeah.
still gonna, I have two boys and as to any other mom, they mean the world to me, right? And because I'm a working mom, I miss out on a lot of things, right? Because you just don't have the time to be there. So if I'm not with my kids, do I want to be at a job where I feel unfulfilled, right? If I'm not, okay. So, if I'm going to be away from my kids, I want to do something that to me is fulfilling. I want to do something where, like my 8-year old knows a lot of my patients and knows what I do. And he's kind of involved. My husband and my older son are too, right? So now when I'm not home and when I'm busy and I say I can't make it to this event, they
Mhm.
understand why, right? Because they're invested in it with
Yeah.
me.
Oh, I love
So
that.
yeah, and having my own business was truly the only way to do that because as much as I'm not a fan of, and I'll be honest, I'm not a fan of the marketing, I'm not a fan of all the business stuff, right?
Mhm.
But that's the cost of me being able to do what I love versus the cost of me not owning a business and not doing what I love. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And so how do you find the energy and the resources to get through some of those business pieces, the marketing aspect, those back end pieces? Like, what gives you that? Like, how do you support yourself in getting those things done? Or do you have someone that helps you get those things done?
I do have a coach, which has been super helpful. Amber is amazing. I've been working with her. I Before having Amber, again, we can call it fake it till you make it, or face it until you embrace it. But it was truly trial and error, right? And it was about putting yourself out there, which is very scary, right? But certain outreaches will work and certain will not.
Hmm.
Being part of groups such as TeaCup networking, I feel like is huge, right? Because that's really inspiring. You learn from other women, mom business owners who are dealing with the same issues as you are, but also different issues. So you're able to help each other with what you've been able to figure out. Um,
Yeah, you can relate, but you can also share
Right, because
back and
not
forth.
everyone is gonna have the same issue. Everyone has different strengths, right? So, the last meeting, someone said post pictures on your Google page, right? I didn't know that posting pictures on my Google page was gonna improve my, visibility, right? So just something as simple as that, right? Is super, super helpful. My husband and my kids are very patient, so that helps. Like they know how important what I'm doing is. So I definitely get that support. I'm not gonna lie, my kids are older. I have almost a 14-year-old and an 8-year-old. I would not have done this 5 years ago, right? So I marvel at what you do because you have 4 kids with your youngest being 4, right? I don't think I would be able, like, I can leave my 13-year-old at home with my 8-year-old, right? And that's huge to be
Yeah.
able to go in a meeting, to see patients, right? You need that time.
Yeah,
And
childcare is
some
a huge piece of being able to have a business, and it's a privilege to have that opportunity, that flexibility to
Absolutely.
have the kids taken care of.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like you've got that
Yeah,
established now.
I think it has to be the right time in your life. Um, and again, I was kind of thrown into it. It was sort of like sink or swim, right? When we moved to Pennsylvania, there was a tornado. if you remember.
Hmm.
So I had an offer to continue with the Board of Education in New York. I would have had an hour and 15 commute, but
Hmm.
I would have had summers off and, spring break off, right? Um, and like, and it's hard because you're turning away from a job with a stable income and with time for your kids. Like, let's be real, having summers off is
Hmm.
incredible, you know?
Right.
But at that point, I was already kind of thinking about things and it just didn't feel right with me. And then the tornado happened, right? So it was like, do I take this offer? Because if I take this offer and I work 8 to 2 and commute an hour and 15 minutes, I know there will be no time for me to do this thing that I've been thinking about, right?
Yeah.
So do I take this offer or do I go for the stability? And then the tornado happened. And I was like, well, I'm not leaving my kids, and being an hour and 15 minutes away from them. My husband is a nurse, so he's not accessible, right? Like I need to be close by and I need to have flexibility, So certain things happen in your life, I feel like that really lead you in that direction, right? Like I couldn't make that decision and the tornado kind of made it for me.
So
And
what made you move to Pennsylvania?
um
What brought you?
Yeah, so we lived in New York during the pandemic, and my husband was a nurse, and he worked in one of the busiest hospitals that was hit with COVID. I worked in the Board of Ed, which COVID affected that as well. Um, and it was just a lot. And we were ready for a quieter lifestyle.
Okay.
That was more geared towards kind of family living. And we were in the city in New York, and the school system there is different if you're in the city, right? So in the suburbs, it's like if you're in a great school district, you're in a great school district, you don't have to worry about where your kids are going to school. In the city, depending where you are, like, there's testing, neighborhood, you could it's not so
Right.
easy
It's
for your
it's
child
different.
to
Yeah.
access the kind of education that you want them to access, right? So
You just
I
did some
get
research, or did you know people here in
a friend
Pennsylvania?
of ours actually moved from New York, also here about 9 years ago. He's a realtor here. And when they moved, we were like, you guys are moving to Pennsylvania? Like, what is happening, right? Because it's like, wow, that's not even New Jersey, right? And it's so funny because um we're contemplating this move and we thought of North Carolina first and we went there and it just didn't feel right. And I'm like, well, why don't we go and see Jake and have him take us around, right? And it felt right. And it
Oh, I
kind of
love
fell
that.
into place. Yeah. We found our house and it just fell into place. And I feel like for the past probably my whole life, but maybe because I'm getting a little bit older and contemplating things a little bit more, I feel like in the past like 3 to 5 years, you make certain decisions and some are hard to make, but as you look back on it, you realize things just fell into place.
Yeah, it sounds like you had a lot of decisions, a lot of things that you made, pulled the trigger, and they fell into place
And it
really
was
nicely
about
for you.
pulling and it was about pulling the trigger. And there was so much stress, and the tornado was stress, and then we had a home fire. It was the past 3+ years have been amazing, but also really tough.
Yeah.
Um, and I think part of them that time period being so tough is looking back at it and real like it's okay, pull the plug. It's gonna be tough, but it'll be worth it at the end, right? And there are periods now where I stress so much because, maybe like I'm consistently busy and then something happens. And like for 3 weeks, I'm like, hello, where are all these patients? And then panic sets in. So you just happen to have me like on
It's a
a
very
really,
cyclical business.
exactly. You
Being an
happen to,
OT, I understand that. Yes, I
yeah.
know
And
January is quiet,
exactly.
July and August can
January
be
was
dead.
horrible. January terrified me. Um,
September and October, though,
Exactly.
they're called
Exactly. So you have
major.
I'm like we're doing this interview at a really good like mentally and emotional good spot for me. So I'm not always like this calm and inspiring and saying things fall and like talk to me 2 weeks from now it might be a different story. But I feel like that's all part of it. Like you have to, you said, how do you do this whole business thing? It's like you have to give yourself the space for feeling good, and you have to give yourself the space for feeling bad.
Yes, so you just led into my next question because I was just going to ask, how do you take care of yourself? Like, how do you find those things that feel good for you inside of all of the
Right.
other things that are going on?
Honestly, I've learned to let things go, and to say that sometimes doing nothing is productive,
Mhm.
is
It's a
huge.
hard one.
It's
I
a
think
hard
for
one.
women, especially moms, that's
Yeah.
one that I really,
Like,
and even still, I struggle with it, but
yeah, well,
really had to learn.
behind this computer is a laundry hamper that is like twice its height. Okay, because laundry is not done. And before I would look at it and feel like it's like, oh my gosh, I'm a failure as a mom, right?
Mhm.
But recently I saw someone post where, something where a mom wrote, me laying down on the couch while the rest of my house is not clean is showing my daughter that it's okay, because laying down on the couch when you need it is also important, right? Like
Yeah.
we can't do it all. It's impossible.
Right. Well, and I
Feel
don't
like,
know about you, but I know my mom, like when I grew up, my mom was always busy. And even now, like we just had a conversation this week and she said, I feel like I have all of these things to do, but when I look at it, it's not really that much. But she can extend those things to fill her time. And she finds things to keep busy. And so when I had kids, I was filling my time to keep busy, but it felt like I was so resentful of
yeah,
having to do all of that laundry and then feeling guilty when I didn't do the laundry or
yeah,
feeling guilty when I sat down. And so that's
yeah.
a huge
I
point of
had
like letting go of that.
Absolutely. I had a conversation with my older brother and with my mom, and he's also a business owner. And he's like, well, what are you going to do next? Right? Because I travel to people's homes. So I serve as
Mhm.
Montgomery and Bucks County for the most part. Um, And he's like, well, when are you going to open a clinic? Are you going to hire like more therapists? Like, what is the next step? I'm like, there isn't a next step for me right now, because I have an 8-year-old and a 13-year-old who's turning 14 and who already doesn't really need me anymore. So my time with,
They will always need you.
yeah, yes, but it's so different.
You don't need those day to day,
Yeah, it's
moment
just
to moment
different.
check-ins. Yeah.
Yeah, he went from being like that, mom's boy to like wanting to spend time with his friends, and that's normal, and I love that, right? But my time with my kids is limited, right? So it's also realizing how much time do I want to spend on my business, and how much time do I want to spend on my family?
Yeah.
Where do I consider my business successful right now? Versus where do I see it in 10 years, right? So in 10 years, when my kids are not home and I want to work more, right? My goals for my business are going to be different. Right
Absolutely.
now, my goals need to fit my personal life as well. And my brother doesn't have children. So his mindset is grow, 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 grow.
Hmm.
And when we had this conversation, my mom was sitting there as well. And, we immigrated from Ukraine, right? So when she came here, she had to work, 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 work to establish herself. And, she's retired now, and she did one, I don't know how she did it. To me, moving to Pennsylvania was tough at 37. She moved from Ukraine to the United
Different
States.
country. Yes.
Yeah, without a language, having to establish a new career. And that comes with, you immigrate for a better life. What does a better life mean? Having funds and being able to purchase things and like have a home and things that we couldn't have there. And she said, I realized like I was working so much, I was looking, for the savings, and where's all of this now? And you guys are 40 and 47, and where did the time go? And I love what you just said, because you're actually investing time in your kids, right?
Yeah.
So, and she has that regret. So it's finding the balance, right? And there are some business owners that are focused on opening up a clinic and on hiring therapists. And when I first opened up my business, I would compare myself and kind of feel like, well, does that mean I'm a less successful business owner
Hmm.
because someone within 3 years, was able to do this, whereas I'm still, driving in my car and seeing patients. But for now, driving in my car, seeing patients works for me. I actually really love it. I
Yeah.
really love being in their homes. It's a whole different experience for me. I'm part of their family.
Yeah.
I meet the siblings, the grandparents, whoever's
Well, and
there.
you're seeing the environment too, which being someone who travel to homes and still
Yeah.
sometimes sees clients in their home,
Mhm.
it's such a unique opportunity
Mhm.
to really individualize the plan. Because when you
Absolutely.
have a child coming into a clinic,
It's
not that you
different.
can't have goals and work on those same things, but you're pulling them out of their
Yeah.
natural environment.
Yeah.
You're not seeing what do they have at home, what are they actually
Yeah.
doing at home.
Yeah.
So instead of trying to replicate it, you can actually do the
Yeah.
activity. And I
Absolutely.
know we can dive in here too a little bit. I know for you, like you're very hands-on and you have specific approaches
Mhm.
and things that you've trained in
Mhm.
so that you can help the families learn that as well to do at home. Is that right?
Uh, yeah, yeah.
Mm.
So for me, empowering parents is huge. Um, Parents feel alone and lost a lot of the time. So it depends, I treat kiddos from 0 to about 6 years old, sometimes older depending on the condition. And
Mhm.
sometimes it could be something really simple where I'm in and out. I could be done in 2 to 4 visits, right? And sometimes it's a more chronic condition that's more complex. And whether it's simple or complex, the way our healthcare system is built right now is the parent has to fight for everything and the parent
Mhm.
feels alone.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
I just,
it's hard to find an advocate. And
yes,
even then like going through an advocate, they don't know your child.
yeah,
They might know the services, but they don't
yeah,
necessarily always know what's
yeah,
going to be the right fit because they're
yeah.
not the professional seeing the child and knowing which techniques, knowing which strategies
It
are
and they
going to
don't know
be.
that child like that parent does,
Yeah,
right? So it's important for me to, especially with the kiddos who are a little bit more chronic and who have more complex diagnoses. Part of what's very rewarding for me is to be able to give parents a sense of control in a
yeah,
situation where they've lost all control.
yeah,
And the only way to do that is to make them feel like they can do something, that they don't have to rely just on me or someone else to be able to help their child, right? And that, I say that now and I kind of have goosebumps, right?
yeah.
Because kind of one of the things that we say when we have, if someone asks you, do you want to have a boy or a girl, right? And everyone tries to give like the politically correct answer as long as
As
they're
long as they're
healthy.
healthy. Yeah,
Exactly. But the parents that I deal with a lot of the time have been dealt the card of they're not healthy.
yeah,
And that's so difficult as a parent.
yeah.
Um, and when you can't find that advocate, when you don't know what to expect, when you don't know where your child is going to end up being, when you don't know what services they need versus don't need. Like it's just so, so tough. So, so tough.
So how do parents generally have they already reached out for services somewhere else before they find you? Are you usually the first phone call? Like, how does a family typically find you?
I wish I would be the first phone call. I feel like sometimes they've gone through a lot of settings that didn't work for their kiddos. I'm
Yeah,
also an out-of-network provider, so I don't accept insurance. For people who have out-of-network benefits, I do provide super bills and they could submit for reimbursement. But I don't have I don't accept insurance. And the reason for that is because insurance was one of the things that didn't let me treat children.
yeah. It's the reason why I never accepted insurance too, because same thing, it
Yeah.
allows me to come in and see the
Decide
whole
what's the best for
situation,
this
right?
child.
And work with the whole family. So if today, I say like if I'm seeing Johnny and Johnny is my client, but tomorrow I come into the family and Sally's having a really hard time. I can help mom with Sally today because I do more of like the emotional regulation, some of the
Right,
behavioral stuff with OTs, the
right.
play, eating, like So less about the physical stuff. But if I start working with her or give mom some ideas, I don't have to
You
justify
can
that
bill
in a
for
note.
that.
Right. And
Exactly.
if mom and I are talking about what the bedtime routine is, I don't have to tie it back to a goal. Can
Yeah.
I? I'm sure I can
Yeah.
somehow get creative and tie it back, but we
Yeah.
can have the conversations that need to be had
Mhm.
in those moments where
Mhm.
the whole family is at
Mhm. Mhm.
versus, well, this is what the goal said, so this is what we have to work
Yeah.
on
And
today.
you were right. You hit the nail on the head where you said I could be creative. I got tired of having to be creative to
Yep.
justify, like, I'm not a writer
Me
and
neither.
I'm a physical therapist. And if I know that something is effective, I want to use it. So
Right.
the trainings that you're talking about or the specializations that I have, a lot of them are not covered by insurance
Yeah.
because they're not considered evidence-based. In order for something to be considered truly evidence-based, there would have to be randomized controlled trials, which means that you have a large population of kiddos. A part of that population is not gonna, you're gonna hold back the intervention, and a part of the population is gonna receive that intervention, right? Who wants to do that for
Right.
kiddos, right? It's
Just
tough.
well, and just ethically, you're
Right,
keeping how,
right.
and there have been
You're
trials,
holding
there
back
have been
treatment.
studies, right, where after a certain amount of time, then that population also gets that treatment to catch up
But for
with
kiddos,
the
that
advantage.
doesn't
It's tough.
apply because development has a time frame to it, right? So
Mhm.
you're not going
Yeah.
to hold, exactly, you're not going to hold back hair. But case studies wise,
Yeah.
these kids get better with these treatment methodologies, right? But I would have to get creative and borderline fraudulent for insurance to pay for that, right?
Yeah.
Um, but providing those services will get them out of services sooner. It's like
Yeah.
we can have a 24-hour conversation on this.
Yes.
But to tie it back to your question, that's why I'm often not the first phone call because, parents have tried
Hmm.
a number of things that may not have worked very well, or they want to supplement something that perhaps is working very well, is working well because what I do is so specific,
Hmm.
uh, that it's more of a supplement rather than, um, you know,
Yeah, and you mentioned like the duration, like sometimes it's only 2 to 4 visits, sometimes it's a little bit longer. Do
mhm.
you generally see kids once a week, every other week, multiple
Yeah.
times a
So
week? Like again,
yeah,
it's
and
just
so
depending.
again, another beautiful part of me not taking insurance is I get to decide, as well as more importantly, even the family gets to
Mhm.
decide what's appropriate for that child. So generally speaking, I try not to see kiddos more than once a week. So I'm not that therapist where you go for an evaluation and they tell you, okay, we're going to see your child twice a week for 6 weeks because they might not need 6 weeks, right? And if I educate you well during the visit and what I'm doing, you don't need to see me twice a week. Because guess what? Me being there twice a week for even if it's an hour session, right? Twice a week is not going to make a big difference if you don't do anything all those other days. So my job as a therapist is, of course, to get my hands on and to treat, but also to educate you so you know what I'm doing and you could do it on your own as well. I like to have the parents that I work with, I like to get them to a point where they could sort of think like me, right?
Mhm.
And I don't want to put pressure on them. I obviously don't expect them to be a physical therapist,
Absolutely.
but in easy, simple ways, what can you do? How can you look at your child? How can you hold position your child? What does it mean? And what can you do that fits in your lifestyle, which is why being in the home helps, which
Yeah,
is
and
why
it's
being there once a week is sufficient. And I also communicate with my parent, like text, phone calls in between sessions all
yeah,
the
it's
time.
it's so important. And I
Yeah.
do the same thing when I work with moms. Like I can come in and work with a child for an hour a week, but if mom
Mhm.
has no idea why I've decided to pull out Mr. Potato Head and play that with the kid for 45 minutes, then
Yeah,
tomorrow when she plays with Mr. Potato Head, like if she doesn't know the why or
exactly.
what we're looking for, then
Exactly.
we've done
Yeah.
nothing. And so
Because
it's
when
getting
you,
families to understand, like, hey, we're gonna use Mr. Potato Head because we're really trying to get that body orientation or those fine motor skills or whatever it might be
right.
that day, right?
Mhm.
But then when they know that, they can then carry that over to another activity. Oh, right. Like that's what we were doing with the Mr. Potato Head. I can do this with the stuffed animals at bedtime
Right,
too, or
right,
being able to be a little bit more creative, be a little
right,
bit more flexible. And I think families really struggle with that because they don't understand those whys. And so then they can't be more creative. They can't
right,
build it into their routine
right.
like we're supposed to be doing. And when they understand those whys, it then becomes a little bit easier to do that.
Absolutely. And then the treatment happens a little bit every single day.
Yeah,
And that's where progress happens,
yeah,
right? It's not about
absolutely.
me seeing a child twice a week for 2 hours, right? Because each day has what, 12 waking hours times seven. So whatever the percentages of that.
Yeah, and a
It's
lot of those kids are napping too. So
exactly right. It's not sufficient. So when it's kind of, I see kiddos with oral ties and torticollis and plagiocephaly, right? So when it's a diagnosis like that, where I can educate
mhm.
the parent feels empowered, can handle it on its own. That's the kiddo, depending on how early we start, right? That's the other problem with insurance. You can't really start early. They're waiting for like a severe sudden
Mhm.
diagnosis to approve
Yeah, a
services.
specific percentage that needs to be hit.
Delay,
Sometimes you
right?
just have to wait and wait until the kid ages to
Exactly.
get
They're
that
waiting for
delay.
that 30% delay or whatever it may be. I
Yeah.
had a dad call me today, which I love because they have an older child and now have a younger child who's 5 days old. And he called me because he was ready to start services. I'm like, well, why don't we wait a week or two and see how she does, right? But
So
but
funny.
but if you recognize,
Yeah,
because you know what happened to your older child, that there may be an issue and you get in there quickly,
right
that's
away. Yeah,
that's the child that I see for 1 to 2 visits, right?
yeah.
If you wait for that 30% delay, it's going to take a whole lot longer to reverse whatever has occurred while we were waiting.
I love
And then the more complex kiddos with chronic issues, I could see them ongoing. It really depends on the child and what they need, at a frequency that's specific to that child and to that family. It
it.
could be once a week, it could be twice a week, it could be an intensive for 5 days, and then we take a break. Um, so again, I have the flexibility of together with the family deciding what works for that child and for that family, which is amazing, which is again why I needed to have my own business because
I
that
love
was the
it.
only way for me to do that.
Yeah, so if I love this. I love your approach. I love what you're doing. And if someone that's listening wanted to find out more about what you're doing or kind of inquire about how to work with you, how would they find you? Where are you in
Sure.
the world?
I'm in the virtual world, which I'm not a fan of, but on Instagram, my handle is Loving Touch PT, as well as on Facebook. I'm lovingtouchpt.com is my website. From all of those venues, you could reach out to me. You could schedule a free virtual consult or introductory call to discuss your concerns, to meet me in this manner so that you see what I look like and my energy, you feel my energy, you recognize, am I the right provider for you? Because I love what I do. Um, but I'm not perfect for everyone, right?
Yeah.
There has to be that fit with the family and with the child.
Yeah, and you
And
need the families that are ready to be hands-on and not looking for someone to come in and
yes, I'm
their
not the
child.
therapist who's going to come in and you're going to leave the room and I'm going to treat and then you're going to come back because a huge part of what I do is education.
Yeah.
And I need you to be an active participant because that's how I get results. So
I
if
love
you're
it.
if you're not willing to do that, then it's probably not the right fit because I don't want you to spend that money, right? So I'm very aware of the fact that it's out of pocket and I want it to be worthwhile for parents. So I want them to understand, what I do, what they're going to do. And I want them to know that this is truly something that they feel is beneficial for them.
Oh, well, I love it. And your families are so lucky to have you.
Oh, thank
And I mean, I know just from my own work how important it is to be in the homes, working with the family, the way that you are seeing the whole environment, the whole system, the whole child. And Thank you so much for being here with me
Oh,
today and
thank
for
you.
sharing with us. So we will look for you at Loving Touch PT on
Mhm.
all those places. And if you're interested in finding out more about Dr. Anna, you can check her out there or reach out to us here at TeaCup and we can make sure that you get connected with us. But until next time,
Thank
everyone, have
thank
a
you so much
great,
for having me.
you're very welcome.